History remembers him as a king, a conqueror, and a nightmare of the West. But before the crown of bone and iron sat upon his brow, before the rivers of foreign lands ran red, Ragnar Lothbrok was a son of the soil and the salt. In the harsh cradle of the Scandinavian fjords, a legend was forged not in the fires of battle, but in the silence of the frozen earth. This is the story of the spark that ignited the inferno. Witness the origins of the most famous Viking to ever live. The world into which Ragnar Lothbrok was born is a realm defined by the absolute authority of nature. It is a landscape where the earth itself seems to possess a consciousness, a brooding, ancient spirit that tolerates the presence of men but never fully welcomes them. Here, in the deep fjords of Kattegat, the geography is vertical and imposing. Monstrous cliffs of granite, scarred by the claws of receding glaciers from a forgotten age, rise violently from the dark, churning waters of the sea, piercing the low-hanging tapestry of gray clouds. The air is perpetually cold, carrying a sharpness that settles deep in the lungs, a cocktail of freezing salt spray, damp pine needles, and the omnipresent scent of wood smoke that clings to every living thing. To survive here is not merely to exist. It is a daily act of defiance against the elements. In these early years, long before the Skalds sang his name in the great halls of kings, Ragnar is a man woven into the fabric of this rugged life. He is young, his beard not yet silvered by age or stress, but thick and dark, framing a face that already bears the weather-beaten map of the North. His eyes, a piercing, crystalline blue, hold a terrifying intelligence, reflecting the shifting moods of the ocean he loves so dearly. He is a farmer, a title that in this era carries no shame, but a heavy burden of labor. The soil of Scandinavia is rocky and stubborn, yielding its treasures only to those with the strength to break it. Imagine a morning in late autumn, where the sun is a pale, heatless disk hovering just above the horizon. Ragnar stands in the middle of a field that slopes gently down towards the water. His hands, large and calloused, grip the wooden handles of a heavy plow, the ox pulling its snorts, its breath pluming in the frigid air like dragon smoke. Every muscle in Ragnar's back and shoulders coils and releases in a rhythmic cadence as he guides the blade through the frost-hardened earth. It is grueling, monotonous work. The sound of the plow tearing through roots and stones is a harsh scrape against the silence of the valley. Yet, there is a grace to his movement, a latent lethality. Even when turning the soil, he moves with the fluidity of a predator. He treats the land not as a servant, but as an opponent to be respected and conquered. But Ragnar's mind is rarely on the furrows he carves. As he pauses to wipe the sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of dark dirt across his forehead, his gaze inevitably drifts. It bypasses the wooden fences of his farm, bypasses the goats grazing on the sparse hillside, and settles on the water. The fjord is a dark mirror, calm on the surface but hiding unfathomable depths. To others, the sea is a barrier, a dangerous edge of the known world. To Ragnar, it is a road. He stands there, leaning on his plow, and listens. He hears the call of the waves crashing against the distant rocks at the mouth of the fjord. He imagines what lies beyond that gray curtain of mist that perpetually shrouds the western horizon. While his neighbors are content with the safety of the harvest and the warmth of the hearth, a hunger gnaws at Ragnar's gut, a hunger that no amount of food can sate. It is the hunger for the unknown. His days are filled with the visceral reality of survival. He hunts in the dense, ancient forests that border the farmlands. These woods are primeval, dark places where the sunlight struggles to penetrate the canopy of pine and spruce. The ground is carpeted in thick, damp moss that swallows the sound of footsteps. Here, Ragnar tracks the elk and the bear. He moves like a shadow, silent and patient. He learns the language of the wild, the snapped twig that betrays a location, the shift in the wind that carries a scent. This is where he hones the instincts that will one day make him a terror on the battlefield. He learns that patience is a weapon as deadly as any axe. He learns that the direct approach is not always the best. Sometimes one must circle, wait, and strike when the quarry is most vulnerable. The forest is his first mentor, the wolf and the eagle his first teachers in the art of war. Evenings bring a different kind of education. Inside the longhouse, the atmosphere shifts from the cold blue of the outdoors to the warm, flickering orange of the firelight. The hall is filled with the smoke of roasting meat and the murmur of low voices. Ragnar sits by the central hearth, whittling a piece of ash wood with a small knife. He listens to the elders telling tales of the gods. They speak of Odin, the All-Father, who sacrificed his eye for wisdom. They speak of Thor and his hammer, protecting Midgard from the giants. Ragnar listens with an intensity that unsettles some. He does not just hear stories. He hears clues. He believes, with an arrogance that borders on madness, that he is descended from Odin himself. This belief is the bedrock of his confidence. He feels the blood of the gods pulsing in his veins, a hot current beneath the cold skin of a mortal. It separates him from the other men in the hall. They are content to be subjects of the gods. Ragnar feels like their kin. There is a specific moment, often repeated in these early years, that defines his growing obsession. It is usually at twilight when the work is done and the world is turning to shadow. Ragnar walks down to the shoreline, where his small fishing boat is beached. He runs his hand along the rough timber of the hull. It is a modest vessel, meant for coastal waters, for catching cod and herring. But Ragnar sees the flaws in its design. He sees how the waves buffer it, how it struggles against the open wind. In his mind's eye, he deconstructs it. He imagines a different shape, sleeker, longer, with a keel that cuts the water like a knife rather than riding atop it. He envisions a sail that can capture the wind even when it blows against him. These are dangerous thoughts. To challenge the design of the ancestors is to challenge tradition itself. But Ragnar's mind is an anvil where new ideas are hammered into shape. He picks up a smooth stone and tosses it into the water, watching the ripples expand outward, further and further, until they disappear into the dark. That is his ambition. A ripple that starts here, in this quiet, frozen corner of the world, and expands until it touches shores no Viking has ever seen. The seasons cycle with brutal predictability. The harsh winter, known as the Fimbulwinter in the old tales, descends with a fury that buries the farm in snow. The days grow short, mere blinks of gray light between long, stretching nights. This is the time of endurance. Ragnar spends hours staring into the flames, his mind traveling while his body is trapped. He looks at his hands, strong and capable, and feels they are wasted on the plow. He looks at his family, the people he protects, and knows that the meager harvest of the rocky soil is never enough to guarantee their safety. The world is vast, teeming with riches and lands that are soft and green, lands where the sun shines warm and the soil is deep. He knows they exist. He can feel them like a phantom limb. The skepticism of his peers, the warnings of the old earl who demands obedience and adherence to the old ways, these are but stones in his path. As the ice begins to melt and the first green shoots of spring push through the thawing mud, a change comes over Ragnar. The awakening of the earth mirrors the awakening of his purpose. He stands on the high cliffs overlooking the fjord, the wind whipping his hair and cloak around him like the wings of a raven. He looks not at the land, but at the horizon line, that sharp division between the gray sea and the gray sky. It is a barrier that has stood for centuries, marking the end of the Viking world. But Ragnar Lothbrok decides, in the quiet solitude of the wind-swept height, that the barrier is a lie. There is no end. There is only the beginning of something else. The farmer is dying, shedding his skin like a serpent. The king is waking up. The roots of the north have gone deep, anchoring him in strength and tradition, but the tree must now grow, and it will grow towards the west. The solitude of the furrowed field and the silent contemplation of the sea eventually give way to a different kind of strength, the strength of union. In the harsh lexicon of the North, love is not a soft, fragile thing spoken of in whispers. It is forged in iron and proven in blood. Ragnar Lothbrok is no longer a solitary figure against the landscape. Beside him stands a force equal to his own, a woman whose name will be whispered with as much reverence as his, Lagertha. Their life together in the farmstead is a study in balance, a harmony of violence and domesticity that defines the Viking existence. The morning mist still clings to the valley floor, but the silence is broken by the rhythmic, sharp clack of wood against wood. In the open space before the longhouse, where the grass has been trampled flat by boots, Ragnar and Lagertha are moving. They are not embracing but sparring. It is a dance of lethal intent performed with absolute trust. Lagertha holds a round shield, painted in teal and white, its rim battered from years of use. In her other hand, a short sword moves with the speed of a striking viper. Ragnar attacks with an axe, not with full force, but with enough weight to bruise bone if the block is missed. They circle each other, breath pluming in the cold air, eyes locked. There is no anger in this exchange, only a profound, wordless communication. They are testing each other, sharpening each other like whetstones. When Lagertha deflects a blow and sweeps Ragnar's legs, sending him to the dirt, there is no humiliation, only a flash of admiration in his eyes as he looks up at her. She offers a hand, pulling him up, and for a fleeting moment their foreheads touch, a gesture of intimacy more powerful than any kiss. This is the foundation of their legend. They are partners in war before they are partners in peace. Inside the longhouse, the dynamic shifts but the intensity remains. The space is filled with the evidence of a growing family and a rising status. The walls are adorned not just with tools of farming, but with trophies of minor raids and skirmishes, furs of exotic animals, weapons taken from defeated rivals. Lagertha moves through this space with a queen's dignity. She is the heart of the home, but her hands, currently kneading dough for the day's bread, are the same hands that can sever a man's lifeline. She manages the estate with a shrewd intelligence, counting the stores of grain, inspecting the wool for the loom, and ensuring that the thralls are working efficiently. Ragnar watches her from the bench where he is oiling his leather armor. He sees in her not just a wife, but a counselor. In the quiet evenings when the children, Bjorn, still young and eager, are asleep, they sit by the fire and speak in low tones. They do not talk of gossip, but of strategy. They discuss the alliances of the neighboring clans, the weakness of the current earl, and the rumors of wealth in the west. Lagertha listens, her eyes reflecting the flames, and offers insights that cut through Ragnar's ambition to the practical truth beneath. She grounds him even as she encourages his flight. The farmstead itself has become a gathering point. It is no longer just a place of agriculture. It is becoming a court in exile. Young men from the surrounding valleys, disillusioned by the stagnation of the earl's rule, find their way to Ragnar's land. They come under the pretense of trade or seeking work, but they stay for the atmosphere of purpose that radiates from the couple. Ragnar does not declare himself a leader, he simply acts like one. He resolves disputes over land boundaries with a wisdom that surprises the elders. He organizes hunting parties that bring back more meat than anyone else. He is building a loyalty that is organic, grown from the soil up, rather than imposed from a throne down. There is a palpable tension in the air during the planting season. A raid from a rival clan, jealous of Ragnar's growing influence, threatens the peace. The scene is not one of chaotic battle, but of organized, terrifying defense. When the alarm is raised, a single mournful blast of a horn echoing off the fjord walls, Ragnar and Lagertha do not panic. They move with practiced synchronicity. Ragnar dons his leather cuirass. Lagertha braids her hair back tight and takes up her shield. They step out of the longhouse not as a farmer and his wife, but as a shield wall of two. The skirmish is brief and brutal. The attackers, expecting soft farmers, are met with a wall of steel and fury. The narrative focus here is on their coordination. How Ragnar steps aside to let Lagertha strike, how she covers his blind spot with her shield. It is a choreography of death. When the dust settles and the intruders are driven off or lie still on the cold ground, Ragnar and Lager stand amidst the carnage, breathing heavy, blood on their hands. They look at each other and the bond is sealed once more. They have protected their world. As the sun sets, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red, the mood turns contemplative. The threat has passed, but the reality of their situation settles in. They are too strong for this small life. The farm cannot contain them. Ragnar stands by the water's edge again, but this time Lager is beside him. She does not ask what he is thinking. She knows. The West is calling. The children are growing strong, fed on stories of glory. The land is secure, but the ambition is restless. Ragnar points to the horizon, tracing a line where the sea meets the sky. Lager nods, her face set in grim determination. She does not fear the unknown. She fears a life unlived. They turn back to the house, where the warm glow of the fire spills out onto the snow. They are the king and queen of this small patch of earth, but the crown is invisible, and the kingdom is yet to be claimed. The night falls, heavy and silent, wrapping the house in darkness, but inside, the fire burns brighter than ever, fueled by the shared dream of two souls who refuse to kneel to fate. The seasons in the north are not merely markers of time. They are the dictators of destiny. As winter begins to loosen its iron grip, retreating into the high mountains to wait for its return, the world of Kattegat begins to stir. But for Ragnar Lothbrok, the coming spring brings a restlessness that cannot be cured by the plow or the axe. The Earl's command is law, and the law states that with the melting ice, the ships will sail east. They will sail to the lands of the Balts and the Russ, to poor villages already stripped bare by years of raiding, to a known world that offers no surprise and little glory. Ragnar stands on the docks, watching the preparations for this annual ritual of mediocrity, and feels a profound rejection of the known path. His eyes are not on the busy harbor. They are fixed on the open, terrifying emptiness of the West. To go there is forbidden not just by the Earl, but by the collective fear of a people who believe the world ends in a waterfall of monsters. Ragnar, however, does not see monsters. He sees a question waiting to be answered. He turns his back on the bustling village and takes a path less traveled, a winding trail that leads away from the communal areas and into the dense, shadowed solitude of the forest. He is seeking a different kind of mind, a chaotic genius that mirrors his own hidden rebellion. The path leads to a secluded cove, hidden from the prying eyes of the Earl's spies. Here, the air smells different. It is heavy with the scent of freshly cut oak, boiling pitch, and the sharp tang of creative madness. This is the domain of the boat builder. The workspace is a clutter of timber, tools, and strange diagrams drawn in the dirt. But amidst the chaos, a skeleton rises, the frame of a ship unlike any that has sailed from Kattegat before. Ragnar approaches the vessel with a reverence usually reserved for shrines. He runs his hand along the keel. It is deeper, stronger, designed not just to skim the surface but to cut through the heavy Atlantic swells. The hull is wider, capable of carrying more supplies for a journey of unknown duration. He looks at the builder, a man who exists on the fringes of Viking society, and they share a look of conspiratorial pride. There are no words needed to understand the danger of what they are doing. They are building a vehicle for treason. They are building a key to unlock the horizon. Every nail driven into this wood is an act of defiance. Ragnar examines the mast, taller than standard, meant to hold a sail of immense proportions, a net to catch the wildest winds of the open ocean. But the ship is only a vessel. It needs eyes to see where no landmarks exist. Ragnar leaves the cove and climbs to the highest peak overlooking the sea. The weather is turning. A thick, gray fog is rolling in from the water, swallowing the sun and erasing the world. It is the sailor's greatest enemy, the blindness that leads to death. Ragnar reaches into his pouch and withdraws a rough, unpolished crystal, a sunstone. He holds it up to the gray sky. To the uninitiated, it looks like a simple rock. But as Ragnar rotates it, squinting against the flat light, the crystal catches a polarization in the atmosphere, a hidden beam of light that penetrates the clouds. A faint yellow glow appears within the stone, pinpointing the position of the invisible sun. A smile, small and terrifyingly confident, touches his lips. He has found the way. He possesses a compass in a world of guesswork. With this stone and the wooden sunboard he has carved, a primitive navigational circle, he can cross the open ocean without fear of losing his way. He has conquered the fog. The preparation shifts from the material to the human. Ragnar cannot sail this ship alone. He needs a crew, but not just any crew. He needs men who are willing to bet their lives on a dream. He moves through the village like a ghost, visiting old friends and trusted warriors in the dead of night. He sits by their fires, the shadows dancing on the walls, and lays out his plan. He does not offer them gold, for he cannot guarantee it. He offers them immortality. He speaks of a land across the great water, a place rich in silver and soil, a place that the gods have kept hidden for the boldest of their children. He watches their faces change, from skepticism to fear, and finally, to a hungry determination. He recruits Rollo, his brother, a man of immense strength and volatile temper, whose envy is shadowed only by his loyalty. He recruits the desperate and the dreamers. It is a secret fellowship, bound by an oath of silence. They meet in the woods, away from the Earl's Hall, training not for a coastal raid, but for an odyssey. The day of the test arrives. It is not a public launch with horns and cheering crowds. It is a quiet, tense affair in the secluded cove. The new ship, christened with a name that will one day strike terror into Christendom, is pushed into the water. It sits differently than the other longships. It rides high and proud, yet settled deep enough to grip the water. Ragnar steps aboard, feeling the deck shift under his boots. It feels alive. He grabs the tiller, the wood smooth and cold in his hand. They raise the sail, a square of woven wool that snaps filled with the breeze. The ship leaps forward, responsive and eager. They do not go far, just enough to feel the power of the design, just enough to know that this collection of wood and iron can withstand the fury of the open sea. As they turn back towards the hidden cove, Ragnar looks at his crew. The fear is gone from their eyes, replaced by awe. They know now what he knew all along. It is possible. That evening, Ragnar returns to his farm. The house is quiet. He sits by the hearth, the sunstone in his hand, turning it over and over. The weight of what is to come settles on him. He is about to disobey his earl, risk the lives of his friends and family, and sail into a void that everyone says leads to death. But as he looks into the fire, he does not see the flames. He sees the green fields of England. He sees the stone walls of monasteries. He sees a future where his name is not just spoken in Kattegat, but shouted across the world. The preparation is over. The waiting is done. The eyes of the dragon are open, and they are fixed on the horizon. The next time the sun rises, it will rise on a new era. Ragnar extinguishes the fire, plunging the room into darkness. But in his mind, the light has never been brighter. The world, as the Northmen know it, ends where the land releases its grip on the sea. Beyond the last jagged rocks of the Norwegian coast lies a realm that belongs not to men, but to the giants of frost and storm. It is a place of myths, a terrifying expanse known as the Great Void, where the sky and the water merge into an infinite canvas of gray. To sail into it is to sail off the edge of reality. Yet, this is exactly where the dragon's prow is pointed. As the familiar peaks of Kattegat shrink and finally vanish beneath the eastern horizon, a profound silence settles over the crew. It is not the silence of peace, but the silence of awe. They are floating on a sliver of wood in the middle of a universe that is indifferent to their existence. There are no landmarks here, no mountain peaks to guide them, no coastal fires to warm their spirits. There is only the rhythmic, endless heaving of the Atlantic. Days bleed into nights with a monotony that gnaws at the mind. The sun is a rare visitor, hidden behind layers of thick, low-hanging clouds that bruise the sky with shades of charcoal and slate. The sea is a beast of many moods. At times, it is deceptively calm, a flat sheet of polished iron that reflects the emptiness above. In these moments, the only sound is the creaking of the hull, the wood groaning under the pressure of the water, a constant reminder of the fragility of their vessel. The men sit at their oars, their muscles coiled but idle, waiting for the wind. They look at Ragnar, who stands at the stern, his hand firm on the tiller. He does not look back. His gaze is fixed forward, piercing the mist, searching for a destiny that only he can see. He eats little, sleeps less. He is the anchor that keeps their fear from turning into panic. Then comes the wind. It starts as a whisper, rippling the surface of the water, before growing into a howl that tears at the rigging. The sail, that great square of woven wool, catches the gale and snaps taut with a sound like a thunderclap. The ship leaps forward, the dragon head cutting through the swells, throwing up sprays of icy foam that freeze on the beards and eyelashes of the crew. This is the test of the boat builder's genius. The deep keel holds true, preventing the vessel from capsizing as it rides the troughs and crests of the massive waves. The sensation is one of violent exhilaration. The ship does not fight the sea. It moves with it, a dancer following the lead of a wild partner. But the physical toll is immense. The cold seeps into the bones, a damp chill that no fur cloak can fully block. The salt stings raw skin. The water is everywhere, in their boots, in their food, in the air they breathe. Doubt is a contagion that spreads faster than sickness in the confined space of the deck. As the days stretch into a week, the murmurs begin. Eyes turn to Rollo, expecting him to challenge his brother, to demand they turn back before they fall off the world. But Ragnar senses the shifting mood. He does not offer speeches. Instead, he offers certainty. When the fog is at its thickest, blinding them completely, he brings out the sunstone and the shadow board. The crew watches in hushed reverence as he holds the crystal up to the gray void. They see him find the light where there is none. They see him mark the course with a calm precision. It is an act of magic to them, a communion with the gods. Ragnar is navigating not by the land, which is gone, but by the immutable laws of the heavens. He steers them west, always west. One morning, the texture of the air changes. It is subtle at first, a softening of the wind, a shift in the smell of the spray. It no longer smells only of deep salt and ice. There is an undertone of something else, something rich and earthy like damp soil and wet grass. The gulls appear first, white specks wheeling in the sky, screaming their welcome. They are the messengers of land. The crew rushes to the prow, straining their eyes against the lifting mist. And then, slowly, majestically, it appears. Not a wall of ice, not a waterfall into nothingness, but a coastline. It is a land of shocking green. Unlike the sharp, granite verticality of their home, this land rolls gently. There are soft hills, dense forests of deciduous trees, and sandy beaches that stretch out like welcoming arms. The sun breaks through the clouds, illuminating the scene in a golden light that feels almost divine. They see stone structures in the distance, the monastery of Lindisfarne, rising from the earth like white bones. To the Vikings, it looks like a garden left unguarded. The relief on the ship is palpable, a collective exhalation of breath that had been held for days. They have crossed the void. They have challenged the ocean and won. Ragnar releases the tiller, his fingers stiff from the cold. He looks at the green land, and for the first time in days, the tension leaves his shoulders. He was right. The stories were true. The world is larger than they were told. As the ship glides into the shallow waters, the silence of the ocean is replaced by the sound of the surf on the sand. It is the sound of a new history beginning. The dragon has arrived. The sensation of the ground beneath Ragnar's boots is alien. After weeks of the shifting, unstable wooden deck of the longship, The earth feels unnaturally solid, almost aggressive in its stillness. He stands on the shoreline of this new world, the white sand stark against the dark leather of his boots. The air here is different. It lacks the biting, metallic sharpness of the Scandinavian frost. Instead, it is soft, carrying the scent of damp wool, heather, and something else, something cloying and sweet, like incense burning in a closed room. The wind that sweeps across this holy island is gentle, rustling the tall dune grasses with a sound like whispering voices. Ragnar signals to his men. There is no war cry, no banging of shields. They move up the beach with the silence of hunting wolves, their shadows stretching long and distorted over the pristine sand. Before them rises a structure that defies their understanding of architecture. In Kattegat, buildings are made of living wood, breathing and creaking with the wind. Here, the walls are made of cold, gray stone, stacked with a precision that speaks of an obsession with permanence. The monastery of Lindisfarne sits heavy on the land, a fortress not of warriors, but of silence. Ragnar approaches the heavy oak doors, running a hand over the rough masonry. He is analyzing, calculating. Why build a wall of stone and leave the gate unguarded? Why accumulate wealth in a place with no soldiers? It is a riddle that intrigues him more than the promise of silver. The doors give way with a heavy groan, the sound echoing like a thunderclap in the quiet afternoon. The Vikings step inside, blinking against the change in light. The interior is a cavern of shadows and flickering candlelight. The air is thick with the smell of beeswax and old parchment. And there is sound, not the clash of steel, but a low, rhythmic chanting. A choir of male voices, weaving a melody that is hauntingly beautiful and utterly foreign to ears accustomed to the guttural songs of the mead hall. Ragnar walks down the central aisle, his axe hanging loosely by his side. He looks up at the high, vaulted ceiling, wondering at the engineering that keeps the stone from falling. He sees the stained glass, catching the weak sunlight and throwing pools of ruby and sapphire light onto the stone floor. To a man who worships under the open sky, this enclosed brilliance is disorienting. The monks do not fight. This is the most baffling thing of all. They stand in their stalls, robed in rough brown cloth, their heads bowed, continuing their chant even as the armed strangers fill their sanctuary. They are like sheep waiting for the slaughter, but they possess a strange, passive courage. Ragnar stops before the altar. It is laden with treasures that would buy a kingdom in the north. Golden chalices encrusted with gems, silver crosses that gleam in the candlelight, plates of intricate craftsmanship. His men begin to grab these items, their eyes wide with greed, shoving gold into their sacks. But Ragnar does not touch the gold. His attention is drawn to something else. On a lectern lies a book. It is the Lindisfarne Gospels, a masterpiece of illuminated vellum. Ragnar has never seen a book. In his world, stories are living things, passed from tongue to ear, changing with every telling. Here, the words are trapped in ink, frozen in time. He reaches out, his calloused, blood-stained fingers hovering over the delicate page. He touches the vellum, feeling the smoothness of the skin. He looks at the intricate knots of color, the script that looks like the tracks of birds. He does not know what it says, but he understands its power. This is the memory of this people. This is their magic. He lifts the heavy book, feeling its weight. It is heavier than an axe. From the shadows, a figure watches him. A young monk, terrified but unable to look away. He does not run like the others. He stands by a pillar, clutching a small wooden cross. This is the man who will become Athelstan. Ragnar turns and sees him. For a long moment, the chaos of the raid fades into the background. The shouting of his men, the breaking of wood, the fear of the monks. All of it becomes a distant murmur. There is only this silent exchange between the pagan and the Christian. Ragnar looks into the monk's eyes and sees intelligence there, a curiosity that matches his own. He sees a man who knows the secrets of the ink and the stone. Ragnar walks towards him. The monk flinches but holds his ground. Ragnar reaches out, not to strike, but to touch the simple rope belt around the monk's waist. He is inspecting him, like one would inspect a strange animal found in the woods. He says nothing, for they have no shared language, but the question in his eyes is clear. What are you? He gestures for the monk to follow. He will not kill this one. Gold can be spent, silver can be melted, but knowledge is the only treasure that multiplies when shared. They leave the monastery as the sun begins to dip below the horizon. The sky is now a bruised purple, reflecting the smoke that has begun to rise from the outbuildings. The Vikings carry sacks of gold, laughing and boasting of their easy victory. But Ragnar walks apart from them. He carries the heavy book under one arm, and with the other he guides the monk. He looks back at the stone building, now silhouetted against the flames. He has found the west. He has found the gold. But as he steps back onto the longship, feeling the familiar sway of the sea return, his mind is not on the wealth he has stolen. It is on the mystery he has captured. The door to a new world has been kicked open, and Ragnar Lothbrok has just stepped across the threshold.
Harika. Macera yerini iktidar mücadelesine bırakıyor.
Chapter 6. The Rise of the Earl, Kantan Yükselişi.
Bu bölüm, Ragnar'ın zaferle eve dönüşünü, mevcut düzenle, Earl Haraldson olan kaçınılmaz çatışmasını ve sonunda liderlik koltuğuna, o ağır sorumluluğa oturuşunu anlatıyor. Ancak gürültülü bir isyan değil, soğuk ve kesin bir güç değişimi olarak işliyoruz. İşte uyku belgeseli formatına uygun, 10.000 harf hedefini gözeten İngilizce metin.
Project Ragnar Lothbrok Chapter 6. The Rise of the Earl. Main story: the return to Kattegat is not merely a homecoming. It is a collision of two eras. The longship, heavy with the gold of Lindisfarne and the strange artifacts of the west, cuts through the familiar waters of the fjord. The mist parts before the dragon's head like a curtain being drawn back on a stage. On the docks, the people gather. They are a gray mass of wool and fur, their faces etched with the skepticism of a hard winter. But as the chests are unloaded, as the silver crosses and jeweled chalices catch the dull Nordic light, a ripple moves through the crowd. It is the physical manifestation of awe. Ragnar stands at the prow, no longer just a farmer or a dreamer, but a man who has touched the other side of the world and returned. He walks down the gangplank, the wood groaning under his boots, carrying the weight of his new reality. He does not smile. He knows that every coin he brings is a challenge to the man who sits on the high seat. The great hall of the Earl is a cavernous space, smelling of roasted meat, stale ale, and fear. Earl Haraldson sits at the far end, shrouded in shadows, his eyes glittering with a mixture of greed and paranoia. He is the old bear, scarred and weary, watching the young wolf enter his den. Ragnar approaches the throne. He does not bow with the subservience expected of a subject. He moves with the fluid confidence of a predator. He signals his men, and they pour the spoils of the West onto the dirt floor. The sound of gold clattering against gold is deafening in the silence of the hall. It is a cascade of wealth such as these people have never seen. Cups that sparkle with red stones, plates that mirror the faces of those who look upon them. Ragnar stands amidst this glittering pile, his arms crossed. He offers the Earl a choice without speaking a word. Accept the new world, or be buried by it. The tension in the air is palpable, a taut string waiting to snap. The conflict that follows is inevitable. It is not a war of armies, but a duel of wills, culminating in the ancient ritual of homegang. The scene shifts to the designated fighting ground, a marked square of earth surrounded by hazel poles. The village gathers in a hushed circle. There is no cheering, only the heavy breathing of the spectators and the wind whistling through the nearby pines. Ragnar and the Earl stand opposite each other. The old leader is heavy with armor, relying on brute strength and the authority of his station. Ragnar is stripped to the waist, his skin painted with the symbols of his gods, relying on speed and the hunger that still gnaws at his belly. The fight is a brutal, intimate dance. It lacks the chaotic noise of a battlefield. Instead, the focus is on the visceral details. The crunch of boots on the gravel, the metallic ring of axe against shield, the sharp intake of breath with every swing. It is a study in contrast, the heavy, desperate blows of the old guard against the precise, calculated strikes of the new. Sweat mixes with the dirt on their skin. The Earl fights to keep what he has. Ragnar fights for what is to come. When the final blow lands, it is not with a roar of triumph, but with a heavy, final thud. The Earl falls, and with him, the old laws of Kattegat crumble into the dust. Ragnar stands over his fallen adversary. He is bloody, bruised, and exhausted. He looks around the circle of faces, his friends, his family, the people who now look to him for guidance. There is no joy in his eyes, only a dawning realization of the burden he has just inherited. He picks up the Earl's axe, the symbol of power, and weighs it in his hand. It feels heavier than he expected. The transition of power is absolute. Ragnar enters the great hall again, but this time he walks to the high seat. He sits down, the wood cold and hard against his back. The hall feels different now. The shadows seem deeper, the responsibilities more crushing. Lagertha sits beside him, her presence a grounding force, but even she looks different in the flickering firelight. More regal, more distant. People come to him now not with camaraderie, but with petitions. They ask for justice, they ask for land, they ask for protection. The freedom of the open ocean is replaced by the chains of governance. From the high seat, Ragnar looks out through the open doors of the hall. He can see the rooftops of his growing town, and beyond them, the masts of the ships bobbing in the harbor. Kattegat is no longer a sleepy farming village. It is becoming a hub, a center of gravity for the north. He sees the smoke rising from new forges, hears the hammers of more boat builders. His ambition has ignited a fire that consumes everything it touches. He rubs his temples, feeling the pulse of the earldom beating in his own skull. He is the Earl now. He has the power to sail west whenever he chooses, to claim all the gold in the world. But as night settles over the fjord, bringing with it the cold stars of winter, Ragnar Lothbrok realizes that the hardest journey was not crossing the ocean. It is ruling the land he left behind. The wolf has caught the car, and now he must drive it. Years have passed, and the name Ragnar Lothbrok is no longer whispered in secret. It is shouted from the watchtowers of Christendom with a tremor of dread. He is not merely an earl of a small fjord. He is a king in all but title, the undisputed warlord of the north. The journey has brought them far from the icy purity of Kattegat, deep into the verdant, opulent heart of Francia. The River Seine is a wide, lazy artery of mud-brown water, snaking through lands richer than any Viking had ever dreamed. But today, the river does not reflect the green willows and the pale blue sky. It reflects a forest of stripped pine masts. A fleet, not of dozens, but of hundreds of longships, clogs the waterway. They move together like a vast, migratory shoal of predatory fish, their dragon heads crowding the channel, their painted sails, blood red, raven black, sun-bleached linen, creating a moving tapestry that blocks out the sun. The sheer scale of the armada is a psychological weapon. To the farmers watching terrified from the riverbanks, it looks as if the entire north has emptied itself into their land. The sound is a low, continuous thrum, thousands of oars dipping in unison, the creak of timber, the murmur of an army that numbers in the thousands. The air smells not of the clean sea, but of the damp river clay, the smoke of countless cooking fires from the camps moving along the banks, and the metallic tang of anticipation. At the head of this floating city sits Ragnar's flagship. It is bigger than the rest, its prow carved into a serpent so lifelike it seems to sneer at the water. Ragnar sits on a carved chest on the aft deck. He is older now. The beard is thicker, streaked with gray. The eyes, still that piercing blue, are set deeper in a face mapped by the scars of 100 battles and the heavier lines of command. He wears armor of hardened leather and chainmail, a mantle of fine Frankish wool draped over his shoulders, the spoils of previous conquests. He does not look like a berserker preparing for a frenzy. He looks like a chess player contemplating the board. He studies the horizon where the towers of Paris are just beginning to pierce the morning mist. Paris.
The Île de la Cité.
It is not yet the sprawling metropolis of later ages, but an island fortress, locked tight within high Roman walls of gray stone, encircled by the natural moat of the Seine. Bridges of heavy timber and stone connect it to the banks, fortified with towers that bristle with archers and catapults. It is a nut that has broken the teeth of many armies. Ragnar knows he cannot simply smash it open. The brute force that worked on coastal villages will fail against these disciplined defenses. He watches the city, his mind deconstructing its strengths. He sees the fear in the way the guards pace the ramparts. He knows that a siege is a war of the mind as much as the body. The siege begins not with a grand assault, but with a suffocating embrace. The Viking army fans out, establishing camps on both banks of the river, effectively cutting the island off from the world. The nights become a theater of terror. Ragnar orders huge bonfires to be lit, ringing the city in a wall of flames that turns the night sky a bruised orange. Drums are beaten incessantly, a low, rhythmic pulse that denies the Parisians sleep, a heartbeat of doom echoing off their stone walls. He does not attack immediately. He lets them stew in their own anxiety. He lets them look out at the thousands of barbarians camped at their doorstep, letting their imaginations create monsters far worse than any reality. Days turn into weeks. There are skirmishes on the bridges, brutal, confined battles where men die in the crush of shields, falling into the churning water below. Ragnar watches from a high vantage point, directing his jarls with subtle hand gestures. He sees the exhaustion setting in on the defenders, the dwindling smoke from their cooking fires indicating rationed food. But the walls hold. The city is stubborn. Ragnar knows a change in tactic is needed. He knows that sometimes to win one must appear to lose. Then comes the rumor, spreading like a sickness through both camps. Ragnar Lothbrok is sick. The great king, untouched by swords, is being consumed by an invisible fire from within. The raids stop. The drums fall silent. A strange, heavy quiet descends over the Seine. A tent is erected apart from the main camp, guarded by his fiercest warriors, including his son Bjorn, now a man of mountain-like stature. Only the closest advisors are allowed in. The Franks on the walls watch, hope warring with suspicion. Is the beast truly dying? The culmination of this grand deception is a piece of theater that will be sung of for centuries. A solemn procession emerges from the Viking camp. A coffin, draped in a heavy black bear skin, is carried by 6 jarls toward the city gates. A messenger goes ahead, declaring that the great Ragnar Lothbrok is dead, and his final wish is to receive a Christian burial in the city's great cathedral. The Franks, relieved and eager to see the end of their tormentor, open the heavy gates. The procession enters the city, moving through streets lined with silent, staring citizens. They enter the cool, dim interior of the cathedral, the air thick with incense. The bishop begins the service, his Latin chant echoing off the high stone arches. And then, the impossible happens. The heavy lid of the coffin shifts. A gasp ripples through the congregation. The lid is thrown back with shocking violence. Ragnar Lothbrok rises from the dead. He is not a corpse. He is fully armed, his sword gleaming in the candlelight. The shock is absolute. Before the guards can react, Ragnar's men, who had concealed weapons beneath their cloaks, draw their steel. The cathedral, a place of sanctuary, becomes the epicenter of the city's fall. Ragnar moves to the heavy doors of the church and throws them open, signaling to his army waiting outside. The Trojan horse has worked. The roar of the Vikings finally breaching the city walls drowns out the screams of the betrayed. Paris has fallen, not to the axe, but to the mind of the farmer from Kattegat. The city burns, but Ragnar stands amidst the chaos, a solitary figure, the master of the game, watching his masterpiece unfold. Time in the north does not flow in a straight line. It cycles like the seasons, a perpetual wheel of birth, growth, decay, and rebirth. Years have settled over Kattegat like a heavy snowfall, transforming the landscape and the man who reshaped it. The small farming village that once clung precariously to the edge of the fjord has metastasized. It is now a sprawling center of trade and power, a dense cluster of timber buildings, smoking forges, and bustling docks where ships from lands as distant as the Mediterranean now anchor. The air is thicker here, laden with the smells of tar, imported spices, unwashed bodies, and the ever-present smoke of industry. The silence of Ragnar's youth is gone, replaced by the constant, low hum of a kingdom that never truly sleeps. Ragnar Lothbrok sits on the high seat of his great hall, a structure now doubled in size, its rafters hung with tapestries depicting his own victories. He is no longer the lean, hungry wolf who prowled the forests. The years have added weight to his frame and silver to his beard, which now cascades down his chest in thick, grizzled waves. His face is a palimpsest of his history. Every scar, every deep line around his eyes tells a story of a shield wall breached or a difficult decision made. His eyes, those famed pools of icy blue, have lost none of their intensity, but the fire within them now burns with a slower, more contemplative flame. He does not move with the restless energy of his past. He sits with the stillness of an ancient mountain, observing the world he built with a detachment that borders on melancholy. He is a living legend, a man trapped inside his own myth, watching as the tales of his deeds become larger and wilder than the reality ever was. Below him, in the packed dirt of the training yard that forms the heart of the compound, the future is practicing how to kill. His sons. They are the living manifestations of his legacy, each reflecting a different shard of his complex soul. The noise of their training is a constant rhythm, the grunt of E. There is Bjorn, his firstborn with Lager, now a man whose physical presence dominates any space he enters. They call him Ironside now, a name earned in blood. He is a towering figure, broad-shouldered and immense, moving with the irresistible momentum of a glacier. He fights with a direct, brutal efficiency that mirrors Ragnar's early days. He is the shield of the family, dependable, stoic, and fiercely loyal. Yet, Ragnar sees the burden in Bjorn's eyes, the weight of being the eldest, the constant pressure to live up to a father who is considered a demigod. Bjorn does not fight with joy, he fights with duty. Nearby, moving with a more fluid, almost playful grace, are Ub and Hvitserk, sons of a slog. They are pack hunters, their movements synchronized through years of shared childhood and training. They laugh as they spar, a stark contrast to Bjorn's grim determination. Ub has Ragnar's looks, the same calculating eyes, the same potential for charismatic leadership. Hvitserk is wilder, a storm of energy, quick to anger and quicker to forgive, living entirely in the moment. They are the energy of the new generation, unburdened by the darkest depths of their father's past, eager to carve their own names into the sagas. And then, sitting apart from the others, usually in the shadows of the smithy or perched on a cart, is Ivar, the boneless, the son who cannot walk, whose legs are twisted and useless, yet whose presence is perhaps the most terrifying of all. He does not spar in the traditional sense. He sits, watching his brothers with eyes that burn with an intensity that makes grown warriors uncomfortable. It is an intelligence sharpened by pain, a mind that has had to compensate for the failings of the body. Ragnar's gaze lingers longest on Ivar. He sees the boy constantly working with his hands, sharpening knives to a razor edge, crafting strange, lethal contraptions. He sees the rage that simmers just beneath Ivar's pale skin, a volcanic fury born of being different in a world that values physical perfection above all else. Ragnar recognizes this rage. It is a distorted reflection of his own youthful hunger, twisted by circumstance into something darker, something unpredictable. He knows that Ivar is the most dangerous of them all, for he has nothing to lose and a world to punish. The evenings in the great hall are loud feasts, a cacophony of shouting voices, clattering plates, and the sloshing of ale. Ragnar sits at the head table, surrounded by his sons, yet he feels unparalleled isolation. He listens to their boasting, their dreams of sailing to places even he has not reached, the great sea of the Middle Earth, the golden cities of the far south. He hears the undercurrent of rivalry in their voices, the subtle jostling for position. He realizes that he has not just raised sons, he has raised a pack of competitors. They love him, yes, but they also measure themselves against him constantly. He has become the ceiling they must break through to reach the sky. Sometimes, late at night, when the hall finally falls silent and only the embers of the central fire glow red in the darkness, Ragnar walks alone to the docks. He stands by his ships, hearing the water lap against the hulls. He feels the ache in his old wounds, a physical reminder of the price of glory. He thinks of Lagertha ruling her own lands now. He thinks of Athelstan, the monk whose ghost still haunts his thoughts. He looks at his hands, once so eager to grasp the world, now tired. He knows that autumn is turning into winter, not just in the year, but in his life. The golden age is fading. The legacy is secure in the muscle and bone of his sons, but he wonders, with a deep and quiet dread, if he has created guardians for his people, or the instruments of their eventual destruction. The wind blows cold from the sea, carrying no answers, only the inevitable chill of the changing tide. The end of the saga does not come with the roar of a battlefield or the crashing of waves against a ship's hull. It comes in the suffocating dampness of a stone cell beneath the earth of Northumbria. The air here is heavy, stagnant, and smells of ancient mold and the iron tang of dried blood. It is a place designed to break the spirit, a dark hole where hope cannot survive. Ragnar Lothbrok hangs from rusty chains, his body a map of ruin. The once mighty muscles are wasted, the skin pale and bruised, the famous beard matted with filth. He has been beaten, starved, and paraded as a trophy before a jeering court. By all accounts, he should be a broken man, weeping for mercy in the darkness. But in the silence of the dungeon, there is no weeping. Ragnar hangs in his chains, not with the limp heaviness of a corpse, but with the stillness of a predator waiting in a trap. His eyes, swollen and surrounded by dark circles, are open. In the gloom, they still hold that terrifying, electric blue spark, a shard of the winter sky trapped underground. He is in pain. Every breath is a labor, every movement sends spikes of agony through his battered ribs. Yet his mind is clear. It has never been clearer. He understands now that this is not a defeat. This is the final move in the game he started decades ago. He is not the victim, he is the bait. The heavy wooden door at the top of the stone stairs creaks open, spilling a shaft of harsh, orange torchlight into the cell. King El descends, surrounded by guards who grip their spears with white-knuckled tension. The king is dressed in finery, velvet and gold, but he looks small in the presence of his prisoner. He comes seeking satisfaction. He wants to see fear in the eyes of the pagan who plagued his nightmares for so long. He wants to hear Ragnar beg. El steps close, the torchlight illuminating the sweat on his forehead. He speaks of God, of justice, of the eternal hellfire that awaits the Viking. Ragnar lifts his head slowly. The movement is agonizingly slow, the chains clinking softly like wind chimes. He looks at the king, and then, the unthinkable happens. His cracked, bloody lips curl upwards. He smiles. It is not a smile of madness, nor of delirium. It is a smile of supreme, condescending pity. He does not speak of fear. He speaks of the future. His voice is a rasp, barely a whisper, yet it carries more weight than any shout. He speaks the words that will doom El and his kingdom. How the little piggies will grunt when they hear how the old boar suffered. The king recoils as if struck. The terror he sought to inflict has been reflected back upon him tenfold. He realizes, with a cold pit forming in his stomach, that he cannot kill this man. He can destroy the body, yes, but the legend is impervious to steel. In a fit of desperate rage, El orders the execution. Not a clean death by the axe, that would be too honorable. He orders the pit. Ragnar is dragged from the cell and brought to the edge of the execution site. It is a deep, circular hole dug into the castle grounds. From below, a sound rises, a dry, slithering hiss that sounds like the earth itself is whispering malice. The pit is alive with vipers, hundreds of them, coiled and writhing, a carpet of venomous scales. The soldiers hesitate. Even they, hardened killers, are repulsed by the cruelty of it. But Ragnar does not flinch. He looks down into the abyss and sees not monsters, but the Valkyries waiting to carry him home. He steps forward, almost eager, forcing the guards to shove him rather than drag him. The fall is short. He hits the bottom with a thud that disturbs the nest. The snakes strike instantly. The pain is immediate and blinding. Sharp needles of fire piercing his skin, injecting liquid agony into his veins. The crowd above watches in silence, holding their breath, waiting for the screams. But Ragnar Lothbrok does not scream. He laughs. It is a wet, guttural sound that bubbles up from his chest, defying the poison coursing through his blood. He recites his death song, not for the audience above, but for himself. He speaks of the Valkyries summoning him home. He speaks of the mead hall where brave men live forever. He speaks of laughing as he dies. As the venom does its work, the world begins to blur. The stone walls of the pit dissolve. The faces of the jeering crowd fade into gray smoke. The pain, once sharp, becomes a dull, distant throb, and then nothing. In his mind, the darkness of the pit is replaced by a blinding white light. He feels the sway of a ship beneath his feet. He smells the salt air of the Kattegat fjord. He sees the gates of Valhalla opening, vast and golden, and he hears the roar of 1,000 voices welcoming him. He sees his old friends, Thorstein, Arn, and perhaps, standing quietly in the light, Athelstan. Ragnar Lothbrok dies with his eyes open, staring up at the square of night sky framed by the pit's mouth. His face is frozen in that final, enigmatic smile. Above him, King El looks down, shivering despite his fur cloak. The king knows, as the silence stretches on, that he has made a terrible mistake. He has not killed a man. He has martyred a god. The snake pit is not a grave. It is an incubator for vengeance. The old boar is dead, but the piggies are listening and they are hungry. The death of a man is usually marked by silence, a cessation of breath and a cooling of the skin. But the death of a legend is an event that shakes the foundations of the world. In Northumbria, the snake pit lies quiet, covered by the turning of the earth, but the shockwave of what happened there travels faster than any ship, faster than the wind itself. It travels across the gray expanse of the North Sea, carried on the wings of Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin. It arrives in Kattegat not as a spoken word, but as a visceral feeling, a sudden drop in the air pressure, a shiver that runs down the spine of every living thing. In the fields, the farmers pause, leaning on their scythes, looking up at a sky that has suddenly turned the color of bruised iron. In the forge, the blacksmith's hammer hangs in mid-air, the fire dimming for a heartbeat. And in the great hall, the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok know. They do not need a messenger to tell them that the old boar has fallen. They feel the severance of the bond, a phantom pain in their own blood. Ivar, crawling on the floor, stops and looks into the fire, his eyes burning with a new, terrifying coldness. Bjorn, standing on a cliff overlooking the sea, feels the wind tear at his cloak and knows that the time for farming is over. The time for the harvest of steel has begun. The response is not grief. It is mobilization. Kattegat transforms from a bustling trade hub into the heart of a war machine. Messengers ride out to every corner of Scandinavia, carrying a single name and a single purpose. From the icy fjords of Norway to the dark forests of Sweden and the sandy coasts of Denmark, the clans answer the call. They come in their thousands. The harbor of Kattegat becomes a forest of masts, so dense that one could walk across the water from deck to deck without ever touching the sea. This is the great heathen army, a force of nature assembled to avenge one man. The sound of their preparation is a low, continuous thunder, the sharpening of axes, the painting of shields, the chanting of oaths. It is the gathering of a storm that will wash over England and change history forever. But while the world of men prepares for war, the spirit of Ragnar Lothbrok undertakes a different journey. The darkness of the pit has long since faded, replaced by a road of shimmering light that stretches upward, bridging the gap between Midgard and Asgard. He walks this path not as the broken old man who fell into the snakes, but as the warrior in his prime. The pain is gone. The weight of the earldom, the burden of prophecy, the betrayal of friends. All of it has been shed like a heavy winter cloak. He feels light, his steps springy and sure. The air here is thin and pure, smelling of ozone and eternal spring. Ahead of him rise the gates of Valhalla. They are impossibly high, made of spears so polished they gleam like gold, and roofed with shields that shimmer in the celestial light. The gates do not need to be opened. They swing wide at his approach, sensing the arrival of a rightful heir. A roar spills out from within, not of anger, but of joy. It is the sound of 1,000 familiar voices, a symphony of laughter, the clashing of mead cups, and the songs of heroes. Ragnar steps across the threshold. The hall of the slain is vast, its ceiling lost in the smoke of roasting boars and the golden glow of the hearths. Long tables stretch into infinity, crowded with the greatest warriors who have ever lived. And there, turning to face him, are the faces he has missed. He sees Thorstein, raising a cup with a wide, toothless grin. He sees Arn One Eye. He sees the friends who died for him, and the enemies who died fighting him, all united now in the brotherhood of the afterlife. There is no judgment here, only recognition. Ragnar walks through the crowd, a king returning to his court. He moves towards the high seat at the end of the hall, where the Allfather waits. But he does not sit on a throne. He finds a place among his men. A Valkyrie, beautiful and terrible in her armor, approaches him. She hands him a curved horn, overflowing with mead that smells of honey and summer. Ragnar takes the horn. He looks back at the open doors of Valhalla, catching a final glimpse of the mortal world below. He sees his son's ships setting sail, a black tide moving towards the west. He smiles, knowing they will finish what he started. He raises the horn to his lips. The long waiting is over. The hunger is sated. Ragnar Lothbrok drinks, and the feast begins, echoing into eternity.